So if there was a hellmouth that was a lake, where would you guess it was located? That's right, Florida. You know, you figure when you're doing something in the name of the Dark Lord, there really are no boundaries. Hello, and welcome back. So today I would like to talk about the Splatterpunk Awards. If you've never heard of them before, I feel like they are pretty self-descriptive. It's awards for Splatterpunk authors, Splatterpunk books. Now, these awards were co-founded by authors Raph James White and Brian Keene. They first started back in 2018, and the nominees for this year were just recently announced. I thought it would be kind of fun to catch up on some of the previous winners, and then also read the nominees for this year. There's a decent number of categories within these awards. For now, I'm choosing just to focus on the best novels and best novella nominees and winners. The winners for this year will be announced on August 1st through the 3rd at KillerCon. So before then, I would like to cover the previous winners of those categories and the nominees for this year. So for this first video, we're going to focus on all of the best novel winners of the Splatterpunk Awards since 2018. The 2018 winner of Best Novel was White Trash Gothic by Edward Lee. So before we get into the plot, I do want to mention that there is an author's note at the beginning of this book. There are connections between this story and other previous works of Edward Lee. He says that hopefully it's okay as a standalone, but maybe better if the big head and Minotauress is read first. Transparency, I have not read either of those books. I can see how that would probably have improved the experience, but even though I haven't read those, I still enjoyed this. The title of this really sets the tone of the story, and the visual of the cover I also like quite a lot. So there is this mysterious man who has experienced memory loss, and he is trying to figure out how he can trigger his memories to come back. The thing about this guy, though, is that he is a writer. And what he does is he goes to different locations and he kind of dedicates each location to the story that he writes there. So he doesn't repeat locations. He goes to a place, writes a story, and then he will always go out of his way to go to a different location for a different story. So he's able to go back and look at his previous works, but that's not necessarily going to help him figure out what just happened most recently. But it turns out that he has a novel that he started but didn't finish called White Trash Gothic. So what he's doing is he's trying to figure out from this novel that he started writing where he was when he was writing it so that he can go back there and try to figure out what happened. Now, our nameless author does manage to kind of slowly track down the right neighborhood of where he was. It's not an immediate recollection. What he finds as he is going around meeting people, witnessing unusual things, is that this place is more so familiar with him than he's familiar with it. But slowly but surely, little pieces start to fall into place, and you realize that he is where he should be. Based off of the description that I just gave you, that could just sound like a thriller. But if you're familiar with Edward Lee at all, then you'll know that it's not like, oh, this place, the vibes are off. The vibes are off because it's Edward Lee. Edward Lee, if you don't know, is a very big fan of H.P. Lovecraft. And so he does take influence from H.P. Lovecraft when he writes. A big thing that, to me, comes from that is establishing locations where the vibe is off. Just a general sense of unease. But this is a Splatterpunk book, so we're not stopping with just off vibes, okay? We've got some truly nasty shit going on here. It's like the type of place where they have a moral hierarchy, but it's just not quite what it should be, where, oh, we don't want drug dealers in our town, so we're going to essay them and dismember them to show them that they're not welcome here because selling drugs is wrong. Not in our town. We got some ladies. Oh, there's so much horniness. He meets these women called Snowy and Dawn who are constantly either at each other's throats or eating each other out. They're not just there for comedic relief and sex content, they are integral to the story. The moral, the things, there is a specific thing that our author unwittingly engages in that comes back to haunt him quite a lot. I don't want to spoil it for you. We'll just say it involves a corpse, and you can imagine what might have happened. There are numerous possibilities. And so, yeah, basically, he's there, crazy stuff happens, and you slowly unfold the story of how he was there previously. Something that I thought was a really nice touch about this book in particular. I love it when authors give their main characters tiny little quirks that are kind of annoying. It makes them feel more real. And something that this author does, he'll just say things in the most pompous, arrogant way when he's talking to them, just flexing his vocabulary, his author's vocabulary. And then when the people look at him like he has two heads, he's like, I guess I have to dumb this down and just say, how are you? It's like, but it's such like an unlikable quirk, but it makes sense with the type of character he is, right? And I just thought that was such a nice touch, the way that he trying to make himself sound kind of fancy, you know? I think the title of this is perfect for the tone of the book. All the splatterpunk elements in this book, the smut and the violence and the gore, all of that stuff is very much through a white trash hillbilly type lens. If you have read The Big Head or The Minotauress, I'm sure you would get even more out of this. I may go back and try to read those at some point. Okay, so our 2019 winner is Full Brutal by Kristopher Triana. Now, Kristopher Triana is an author I have been meaning to read for a hot minute, so I was really looking forward to this. And honestly, out of all these books, this one was probably my favorite. Full Brutal is about a teenage girl named Kim who is a cheerleader. She's very pretty, but she's evil. She just acts like a good girl on the outside, but on the inside, she's evil and plotting against everybody. But she has that kind of facade, the good girl facade that she presents to the outside world. It kind of starts for her. She keeps hearing her friends talking about losing their virginity. And she's like, you know, I'm so just kind of bored and unfulfilled in so many ways. And everyone's talking about how this is such a life-changing experience. Maybe I will feel better. Maybe it'll be like this major milestone in my life and I will just feel different, or I just want something interesting to happen. She goes to an adult website to try to get a little direction, and I'm sure, as you can imagine, a teenage girl trying to find direction about sex through an adult film site, probably not giving her a great foundation for spicy time in real life. That's something that's important to remember with those films, is that these are adult film actors. They are actors. They have a scene and they are acting out the scene. Just because an adult film star enjoys something on camera doesn't mean that they actually enjoyed it. They are an actor. So probably not the best foundation for a young woman, or I'm awkward whether or not I should say girl or woman, but you know what I'm saying. Like, I'll just say young woman. A young woman who's like 17, 18, whatever. She kind of ends up spiraling a bit as she's navigating this website and kind of starts getting into more and more extreme things online. And she's like, okay, I'm ready. And her thought process in terms of losing her virginity in real life is that she's like, I don't want to just hook up with a guy my age. That's boring. I'm going to seduce my teacher because that's fun, and because it's such a stereotype, probably the sort of thing you would see on a site like that, right? Like the teacher and the student. Very common trope, right? She decides which teacher, And what was his name? Mr. Blackley. And see, thing about Mr. Blackley is that he sucks. He is also a stereotype of just a dude who has no morals. He's just like, oh my gosh, this cheerleader, I'm a teacher, and this teenage girl is like trying to seduce me, and the only thing that causes any resistance on his part is his concern for getting caught. It has nothing to do with her or what's best for her, or acknowledging that this is not normal behavior. For a teenage girl should not be trying to seduce her teacher, and that as the adult, as the teacher, he should be doing what's in her best interest. But instead, he's just a horny old man. And so eventually they do. She does succeed in seducing him. But our girl Kim here, as established, ain't quite right in the head. So she's like, this is awesome. I'm going to ruin your life. And so she proceeds to just go on this rampage, not just with Mr. Blackley, but with a lot of people, because she's gotten a taste of what it's like to be powerful and to have the power to blackmail and humiliate and ruin people's lives. And she enjoys that so much. She discovers that she is kind of into the dom sub type sexual relationship, but she likes to be the dominant one. More of like a psychological thing almost. Her motive for doing all of these things is not just because she's indifferent to the suffering of others. She gets sexual gratification out of playing the puppet master, manipulate people or control situations to ruin someone's life or humiliate them. And she gets off on it. Like, it is very much about sex for her. She's not seducing him so that she can blackmail him to get an A in her class. She's doing that because she gets off on humiliating him. Like, it's all for her sexual gratification, not to achieve other things. One of the reasons why I liked this book a lot is because this sort of subject can be very hit or miss with me. The good girl who's secretly bad, that women will they will not be so blatantly evil that they will seduce you into thinking that they're good and pure, but then be really mean underneath. It's not that I inherently dislike it, but it's just, it is a very common, dare I say, overdone trope. But I think the reason why, not only did I enjoy this book, I thoroughly enjoyed it. I think it was the level of commitment to this character truly being evil. I liked that it wasn't just using her sexuality to get things that she wants, like a grade or money or something. I liked that her sole purpose for doing any of these things, not just with Mr. Blackley, but with Mr. Blackley's daughter, with her, even her friends at school. She is doing it for no other reason, just because she gets off on the suffering of others. That's her only motive. And so I enjoyed the commitment to her true sadism. The whole good girl image isn't necessarily because she cares about other people having a high opinion of her, as much as it is about the fact that it allows her to continue with her behavior, right? Like, she wouldn't be able to manipulate people as easily if she was known to be a liar. That's kind of the means to the end. Being the good girl image. The manipulation and all of that stuff is not a means to an end other than her own gratification, I guess. There was a scene in this where it's not even the description of it, it's just what's happening. I don't want to spoil it for you, but there's a part where she forces Mr. Blackley to do something that is so... It's not gory. It's a psychological game that she's playing with him. Oh my gosh. It was so... it is just insanely dark, depraved. It's so vulgar what she's making him do, and kind of weaponizing his own sexuality against him, not just completely demoralizing him and breaking him down mentally and emotionally, but that she's affecting his relationship with somebody else that's in his life. I guess the best way I could describe it is that she is doing something that will leave a stain on him as a person. I guess that, you know, a lot of people do feel that way. They kind of get off on the idea of leaving their mark and knowing that that person will never be the same because of them. For my first time reading Kristopher Triana, I really enjoyed how the best horror elements in this, even though there's sex and gore and all that stuff, the psychological aspects of it, I actually think were the darkest part of this. Very effective depravity, the way that it was written, and I thoroughly enjoyed it. Okay, our 2020 winner is Lakehouse Infernal by Christine Morgan. So, the thing about this story is that this is actually a spin-off of an Edward Lee series called the Infernal series. Full transparency, I have not read those yet either. Again, you may not have the setup for the story, but the story does work in isolation as long as you just sort of take it as what it is. This was done with Edward Lee's blessing. He wrote the intro to the book. And as a complete aside before we get into the plot, I actually find this so wholesome because, as I mentioned earlier, Edward Lee is a really big fan of H.P. Lovecraft and a few other authors. And something that I've noticed in the books that I've read from him is that a very common theme is following in a writer's footsteps. He's clearly takes a lot of inspiration from that. He has written books that are direct spin-offs of other H.P. Lovecraft stories, the Innswich horror. And because of the fact that he will write stories that are in H.P. Lovecraft's world, he'll write stories, you know, kind of slightly, you know, within his own way, but kind of mimicking his style a little bit. He plays around with that sort of thing. So because I know and I've seen that he feels that way towards the authors that inspired him, I just find it really, really wholesome. And I can imagine that that must be such a cool feeling for him to have another author feel that way about him, to want to do a spin-off of his books and play around in his world the way that he's done with other authors, you know, and something about that must be very rewarding for him. And I don't know, I found that very wholesome and very sweet. So while that is very wholesome, this book is not. Now, basically our plot is that there is a hellmouth that is established through a lake. This lake is called, Lake Misquamicus. They have established basically a perimeter around this lake because they're like, well, we can't just let people come and go from this hellmouth lake, right? It's not safe. So they build a wall and then occasionally let people in if they ask real nice. Kind of like in real life where something horrendous happens somewhere, and at first everyone's just up in arms about it and they're like, oh my gosh, we have to do something about this. And so they take steps to protect people and to give the impression that the government or whatever is doing something to keep the people safe. But then enough time passes and people kind of forget the very real impact of those events or those places or whatever. Enough distance is created between the people who actually experienced those horrifying things or were there when it happened versus the younger generation, and they don't remember, they weren't there, and so there's just this mystery and mystique and intrigue to these sorts of things, and it basically just becomes a tourist attraction. It's just like an old urban myth. So basically you have this hellmouth lake where things can come out of the lake, such as this dude named Fabius. He's a Roman soldier who was particularly barbaric in his conquest over the lands when he was alive. And so when he dies, he goes to hell because he's like a real bad man, right? Well, it's like, okay, well, we have this hellmouth lake. And so Fabius comes out of the lake in order to do his dang thing, right? Like, this is a man who knows how to commandeer. This is a man about conquest. And he's going to go about it in a very helly way. So you have him coming out of the lake, and then you have other people, a church bus with a very horny lady named June, a man who's flying a plane over the lake, and then of course the plane crashes. There's people who are like, we're gonna go on spring break, and we should go see the Hellmouth. Like, you have all these different sort of characters and what happens to them when they try to go to the lake and what's going on around the lake. And Fabius, sorry, this wasn't an isolated lake originally. There was a town. So when Fabius comes out of the Hellmouth Lake, he walks into a bar. It's like one of those jokes, like, so a Roman soldier from hell walks into a bar. He starts to wreak havoc and establish dominance in a very clear manner. And because, of course, there is a prolapsed anus. And we don't even get that far into the book before it's... No. I did think it was funny because one of the excuses that one of the characters makes when they're planning to go there and saying that, oh, it's not like actually a hellmouth lake. It's, you know, filled with blood and shit. It's probably just that the government had some sort of toxic spill that they're trying to cover up or something, which I thought was so fucking funny. The idea that, you know, typically a government cover-up is going to involve making up a lie about something that is less bad than the reality. But the idea that there would be an oil spill and that the government would cover up something like an oil spill by saying that there's a hellmouth. Like, it would be the other way around, I think. So yeah, I would say that this is kind of similar to White Trash Gothic in the sense that I'm sure the experience would be at peak fulfillment if you have read the Infernal series going into it, but it can be enjoyed in isolation. I like the ridiculous over-the-top elements interwoven with some of more realistic idiocy that you see in real life. It's nasty. It's still nasty, so there's plenty of nasty shit in this book. So fear not, there's plenty of that. Our 2021 winner is the Magpie. Magpie? Fuck. I've heard people say this word before, but I don't remember. The Magpie, I think it's Magpie. The Magpie Coffin by Wile E. Young. Okay, now this I was a little bit unsure. I wasn't sure how I felt about this going into it. I was a little nervous because this is a splatter western. I do have a history of enjoying Firefly when that came out, but typically I'm not a big western person. That may be surprising to you. I tried to go into this with an open mind. I guess I have a bit of an association because when I was a kid, my dad really liked westerns. You know, John Wayne, Clint Eastwood, that sort of thing. I guess I just sort of had this association of westerns being kind of hokey, I guess. But this was actually very good. It has a much grittier and bleak kind of feel to it. This takes place back in 1875. It is about a dude named Salem Cummington, aka the Black Magpie. He's just this big old baddie in the Old West. And he had a mentor, a Comanche shaman named Dead Bear. He's not just like a basic bitch. He has connections with a fucking shaman. Genuinely, not just, oh, someone says they're a shaman, but it's all a farce. There are supernatural elements to this book. When his mentor is killed, he is not happy. And it's basically a revenge tale of him tracking down every single man who was there and responsible for the death of Dead Bear. Dead Bear be dead. The thing about this book, there are supernatural elements, but It doesn't overtake the sort of gritty rawness of the Western elements, I guess. The supernatural elements are a little bit more pulled back, more in relation to things like curses, likelihood of events, weapon enchantments, sort of the effectiveness of certain weapons. It's a little bit more subtle in that regard. It's not necessarily like someone's whipping out a wand out of nowhere and being like, ah, gotcha. I also think, and this is something that leans heavily into Westerns and like the types of characters that are usually the star of a Western, from what I've seen, is that they can get away with being an asshole because they show a certain level of competence. If you are good at what you do, people are willing to overlook if you're a bit of an asshole. That's definitely the sort of character that Salem is. You're kind of willing to root for somebody who really would be a villain most of the time, but his actions feel somewhat justified since it's revenge for his mentor, and he shows a level of skill and competency. So you're willing to overlook the fact that he is clearly a very bad evil man. An element to this that I really liked is that his kryptonite in the book and his strength in the book are kind of opposite sides of the same coin. I liked that. I thought that was very interesting. I was very pleasantly surprised by this book. If you like Splatterpunk, but you maybe would not gravitate towards this because it's a Western, I would not let that deter you. It's not hokey in the slightest. Okay, our 2022 winner is The Nightstalkers by Ryan Harding and Kristopher Triana. There is violence and gore and smut in this book, but unlike our last book that has a very serious, dark atmosphere to it, this has a very different tone compared to that one. This has a lot of humor in it. This is about 1992. Okay, so this is back in 1992. You basically have these two competing grocery stores. There's the pre-existing called Freshway, and then a new grocery store has popped up as a competitor called Devil's Food. And so you basically have these two grocery stores competing in theory. But the thing about Devil's Food is that that's it's also, it is a grocery store, but it is also a front for a devil worshipping cult. But they did take their grocery store responsibilities very seriously. And so they do want to take out Freshway because, they're interfering with business. And the devil's business is the most important business. So they need to get rid of this other guy, right? And The Nightstalkers is basically about Freshway employees who get roped in to working overnight to help clean and, like whatever. And the devil's employees setting up an ambush, sort of like to go try to take them out. It's not zombie-ish in the slightest in terms of the characters, but in terms of you've got these characters in the grocery store trying to keep the bad guys out, so it has kind of that type of energy to it, but it's not zombies. It's these weird, creepy, culty people who, culty in the sense of devil worship, but also culty in the ways that those sorts of employers can kind of feel like, Walmart type vibes. It's intended to be funny. It's intended for people particularly who have worked in retail, which I have. Even if you haven't worked retail yourself, I'm sure you can imagine the Karens and all the annoying customers that are so stupid. And you can imagine what it would be like to have to work in a place like that where people can be such a dick to you and there's really not much you can do or say about it. And people know that and take advantage of that. So there's a lot of humor in here that is related to just that experience, that sort of experience of working in that type of environment. There's some things. It's funny, but do not misunderstand. It is repulsive. There are like the gore, the events, the ways that these characters attack each other. Nothing is off limits. So the darker the better. If you will pay attention to this line. Which, look, Ignore the content. This isn't about, like, whatever. Actually read the line. He promised he'd eat her out later he, if he let her fuck her in the ass. He, her. I enjoyed this story. There are a lot of characters. There's a lot of characters. The book probably would have been just as enjoyable if it was maybe just cut down a smidge. It's nothing egregious, but you know, there's like a lot of like pop culture references and stuff in it too. To me, this is meant to be fun. You know, for horror fans, this is meant to be fun. Okay, our 2023 winner is Playground by Aron Beauregard. Now, I talked about this book already in my Aron Beauregard video. This is the only one I had already read, but we're going to talk about it again. Do you hate children? Because if so, do I have the book for you. Geraldine is this horrible, mean, psychotic old lady. And she's like, you know what would be funny? If we create this farce, we might build a playground in your neighborhood, but we need kids to come over to try out the playground equipment. If you want your kid to come over and do that, then you should do that. Families are bringing their children over to her place to check out the playground equipment because they're like, oh my gosh, we would love to have a new playground in our neighborhood. But Geraldine is a psychotic bitch, and what she's actually doing is creating a situation where, oh, you like this, you know, swing, you like these monkey bars, do you? Well, how about you try this one? And then like a like pit opens up under the monkey bars, and it's like flames coming out. It's like that type of vibe where the mask is ripped away and you see that the real playground equipment it's like a torture chamber, and it's just something that she really gets a kick making these kids, these young children, trying to survive her psychotic little playground traps. And so my experience reading this book, there is an adult man named Rock. If you watched my Aron Beauregard video, you know how I feel about Rock. I will not get into it here. But he's an adult man and he matters. Your emotions are very mixed reading this because some of these children are really good kids and they were really excited about the prospect of getting a new playground in their neighborhood. And so you do feel bad when they're being tortured. But then there's some asshole kids who are super entitled and just the worst. You don't really feel bad for them. And the fact that it's not their fault that they're assholes because their parents are also assholes, but it doesn't change the fact that they're an asshole. My experience reading Playground, whenever I read that, I don't know, maybe a year ago now, my biggest connection to it was Rock, which I'm not going to get into here, but there's an adult man and he matters. The traps and stuff. It's not supposed to be funny, but there's just a part of the book, one of the pieces of playground equipment that the children are trying to survive. Just something happens that just, for whatever reason, was really, really funny to me. And I'm not proud. I'm not proud. But it was. I laughed really, really hard for a very long time. every time I thought about it, I would picture it, and that's honestly like the two parts that stick out to me the most about this book. It's definitely an experience though, because Aron Beauregard, if you have not read him before, he is extremely popular within the genre. He creates scenes, images. He can strike images in your head that will stick with you. Aron Beauregard is very good at kind of snapshot moments. And so when you think about his books, it's very easy for a particular image to pop into your head as opposed to just a general sense of violence and gore, if that makes sense. Something that I've come to realize since having originally read this book is that Geraldine is the type of character where when you're reading this, you don't like Geraldine. Geraldine seems like the worst. She's disgusting and vulgar. You don't like the way that she treats Rock. She's just like gross and old and like, ugh. If Aron Beauregard chose to write this book from Geraldine's perspective, there's a good chance a lot of us would be rooting for her. I would love to see an elderly lady who is unapologetically evil. It's just sort of, I guess, common with female villains in general, is that they put on an air of being very good and pure. Usually an older lady who's evil is like, oh, sweetheart, I'm gonna bake you a pie. But then there's like poison in the pie. You know, like it's usually still with that farce of goodness. So I almost kind of would like to see the just unapologetically evil old lady. I'm not saying that we're rooting for her, like, yeah, girl, go. Girl power. You don't always hate the villain. When you're looking at things through their lens and they're doing terrible things, you're not necessarily rooting for them, but you're also, I don't know if sympathizing is the right word. What is the right word? Tell me. Tell me. Tell me what the right word is, since you know that the one I'm using is wrong. Okay, and our 2024 winner is Maeve Fly by CJ Leede. Okay, so I actually listened to the audio version of this. It was narrated by Sosie Bacon. That is not a joke. So this actually has a similar theme to what we were just talking about, where we have Maeve, who is a woman who works as a Disney princess at a Disney park. So here's the thing with Maeve. Maeve's grandmother is an old lady who was a starlet. She was famous and hot back in the day, right? But now she's old and she's dying. So her grandmother is at home, but she is on hospice care. Maeve lives with her. Her grandmother is by far the most important person in her life. And so not only would she be losing her, but also the roof over her head. So this is the story about her dealing with the grief that starts before someone is even actually gone, because her grandmother is non-responsive. The thing about Maeve is Maeve ain't quite right. And so she works as this Disney princess, and she has a friend that she works with. She genuinely loves her job. She loves working as the Disney princess. She loves LA. She clearly has a level of fascination with people watching. And you get little glimpses into the fact that maybe she is not the most well-adjusted person. So you see, oh, she's actually an internet troll who tries to bait people into saying racist things or whatever, and then exposes them, and she, really enjoys doing that. She has a very dark inner monologue as she's going through her day. You sort of see this woman who is under a lot of stress between the looming death of her grandmother, possibility of losing the roof over her head. She starts to have conflict with her one friend that she has. Her friend's brother, Gideon, enters the picture, and this sort of weird attraction she has to him, but also not wanting to really engage. Like, there's just all these sorts of life things that are adding to her stress levels, and you see her become increasingly unhinged. This is a very character-driven book. The plot is by and large with her getting away with increasingly unhinged behavior, desperately trying to keep her life from falling apart. So the way I felt about this, again, we are falling into this woman who's a Disney princess, and she's presenting herself as being, a certain type of person when there's a lot of turmoil going on underneath the surface. I've said this before, I don't look at reviews before I read books, but sometimes I will look at them afterwards. I did happen to look at some of them for this story, and it seemed like one of the most consistent criticisms of it is that Maeve has not like the other girls type energy. And I have to say that they're absolutely correct, but also completely wrong. The way that I read this is that Maeve is very much not like the other girls, but that's not the author trying to convince us, the reader, of that this is Maeve trying to convince herself. I think that there's perhaps a little bit of a lack of nuance to the way some people are interpreting this. I think that that's Maeve's character. I think that Maeve is afraid of the mundane. She's afraid of being ordinary. And so she convinces herself that she has this facade that she puts on for the world where she looks normal, but there's all this turmoil going on underneath. And yet will look at other people and always takes other people on face value. She's the only one who has a facade. Nobody else has the sort of dark inner thoughts like what she has. Like, oh my gosh, people would just be so appalled if they knew the sorts of dark thoughts that only she has. And surely they don't, because they act so normal. And like that's the character. That's what she thinks. And I think that that's kind of a big part of the point of the book, actually. One particular review that I read said that they kept waiting for the badass to come out. Has all these dark thoughts and does some fucked up things, don't get me wrong, but she was like waiting for the real badass to come to the surface, and it just like never happened. And to me, it's like, that's the point. That's the point, is that she's not a badass, she's a basic bitch. She's coping with her grief. She's coping with her fear and her insecurity by trying to convince herself that she's not ordinary. Don't get me wrong, she does things that the average person doesn't do. She's an ordinary person who's being pushed to the brink and having perhaps a bit of a psychotic episode. She is not particularly special as a person. And nobody likes to admit that. Fair enough. I mean, it's just the nature of the world, though. By definition, most of us are average. It is very like American Psycho. Patrick Bateman isn't meant to be this big baddie in terms of what he's built himself up to be in his head. He's supposed to be a successful man who is still basically ordinary, who is obsessed with the idea of being more than what he actually is. And so he creates these fantasies in his head of like how he's doing all these things and getting away with all this crazy stuff. And he's obsessed with the presentation of perfection, even though it's not real, because he's lying to himself about who he is and that he's more than what he is. And this is similar in that vein, the denial. Being very insecure and trying to cope with that by lying to yourself that you're more special than what you actually are, to the point that they reference American Psycho in the book. And so I think that there was perhaps just a lack of nuance to her character, the way people were interpreting her character. Although I will admit, if I was mistaken, and this is not Maeve trying to convince herself that she's not like the other girls, and it is the author who just thought that that was a good character, I would have enjoyed this a lot less if I actually did take that on face value. But I really don't think that that was the intention, or I don't really think that that's what's going on. So I did enjoy that. I also think that there's quite a bit of commentary in this about life imitating art. The more you want your life to be interesting, to feel like a movie, that it's like sometimes it's easier to imitate interesting things that have been written out for you than it is to actually create your own memories from scratch. You can't control your organic experiences to this degree. So it's easier to fantasize about a very specific set of circumstances that you read in a book or saw in a movie happening to you, and you almost get that sense of fulfillment just from pretending something cool happened than by actually putting yourself out there and having real experiences that will be real and organic and yours, but they just might not be exactly how you would have written them out to be. You're not in control of real organic experiences the way you are of your own fantasies. I also think, as far as it being a Splatterpunk winner, it definitely Out of all these, yeah, I definitely think that comparatively, this does have the least amount of the like the gore and stuff in comparison. I'm not saying it's not in there, it definitely is. But there I would just say that there's less. But yeah, so those are all of the winners since 2018 for Best Novel. If you want to check out the nominees for the Splatterpunk Awards this year, I'll include a link in the description. This was a fun variety, and to be honest, some of these are books that I probably would not have picked up otherwise. I would say my overall favorite was Full Brutal. I was the most pleasantly surprised by the Magpie Coffin. So just as a small aside, I guess I'll say that I'm sorry that it's been a while since I uploaded. I've got some changes in my life happening and it's got me all discombobbled. So my upload schedule might be a little bit weird as I'm kind of trying to adjust to my new sleep schedule and stuff like that. But yeah, so just thank you so much for your patience as I'm trying to get myself sorted out. If you're still here, thank you so much for watching. I really do appreciate it. And maybe I'll see you the next time around. Bye. So they take steps